Okay, let's get cracking. We are hustling people to get through this topic. We have curated some of the biggest brains in New Zealand on this topic. So welcome to Hybrid Cultures by Design. So this is a panel session and we are running it hybrid. So just to establish some norms for this session, you'll see a QR code up on the screen. We invite you to join the Zoom webinar. And if you can disconnect your audio, turn your volume off. We're running this hybrid, obviously, because it's the way that we work now. It's very topical for everybody. So the reason we wanted to run this session in this way was to have a sense of inclusion, connect the audience to the panelists. We've got some joining us virtually as well, and just to give everybody a chance to participate. So as panelists speak today, team, hideous feedback there, hearing your own voice. As the speakers are speaking, drop any questions or comments that you have in the chat. So we're looking for high levels of participation today in terms of norms people. So we're looking for emojis, support in the chat, questions. That's cool, Leslie. Awesome, Pene. Tell us more. We want you to really interact with us at a high level. So the chat is the place that you do that. So I think we're ready to kick off. So if we can have our virtual people on the screen. Are we killing that slide, Anthony? Or? Cool. I'll start with introducing who's in the room with us today. So we have Leslie from Easy Crypto, and we have Pene from noissue, and joining us shortly, any moment now, is my fellow co-founder of Anywhere Culture, Nick Mackison-Smith, and we have Ruth Christie, who is here representing Blue Barn, and we have Eilís Devlin. It's midnight in Ireland where she's streaming in, so we just give her a round of applause for staying awake. And she's from Bravura Solutions. So team, how this will run is we did a bit of a straw man out in the network. What were some things or topics that people were really curious about or wanted to know more about? And so we created a short list of those questions, and then we went out to the market and we found the best people to answer those questions for you. So I'm going to kick off with Ruth. Good morning, Ruth. How are you?
Good morning. I'm good. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you great.
Yay.
So like you and I were talking about recently, is kicking off this kind of work starts with a very important conversation, right? A little group of people called the executive, or maybe like the board. And so getting that strong statement of intent around what does hybrid working mean for our organisation? Strong statement of intent are examples like when the CEO of Shopify came out and said, we are no longer office-centric. Or when the CEO of Eventbrite came out and said, let choice reign. Or more recently, you would have seen on the airwaves what happened at Airbnb. They came out and said, you can work from anywhere, and their careers page got a million hits in that first week. So that strong statement of intent needs to come from the top. And many of us in the room are charged with facilitating that conversation. So Ruth has done this really recently. I really admired her technique. And so she's going to share with us, what was that experience like? And what did you do to get that conversation started?
Awesome. Thank you for the opportunity to share. Hopefully people will learn from what we've done. So I'm working alongside Blue Barn, which is a small company, only 40 or so people, so very little, and with a real desire to be collaborative with our people and with the exec team. So our hybrid working has kicked off about 6 or 7 weeks ago, and the approach that I took was really to co-create it with the senior leadership team. So the original suggestion came from our people, came from employees toward the end of last year, where there was some interest being raised, and the CEO was very open to it and said, you know, let's have a look at how might we get the best of both hybrid and being in the office. And so I was asked to take a look at it and really build something out. And the approach that I took was to design initially a discussion paper for conversation with the SLT. And that included things like, obviously, what we're trying to achieve, what were the key drivers for why we would even consider hybrid, what benefits could it bring, some options for consideration, a few ideas on how we would roll it out. And I think the two most important parts that I included were some guiding principles. So I came up with 6 guiding principles that would steer us on our hybrid approach. And then what would success look like? How would we know if this was working for the business, for our clients, for our people? So I pulled all that together as a discussion paper, circulated it to the SLT for initial feedback, and then we workshopped it. I think what was really useful was to give them a few options to consider and to send a number of questions, prompt questions ahead of the initial discussion, so that we weren't starting with a blank sheet of paper, and so that they did some pre-thinking and started to really be able to step into what might this look like in practice, what would be the pros and cons. Obviously, in such a small organization, everything can be really magnified when we're all in or we're all out, or whether there's a mixture. So we really wanted to make sure it was going to work well for the business, for our customers, and for our people. And so having those success factors, guiding principles, and the options, rather than trying to start from a blank sheet of paper, really helped that be a very rich discussion where every single member of the SLT was able to throw something in the mix, pull it apart, we kick things around, very much that co-creation, that collaboration, and we came up with something that we felt would be useful, which we then took out to the organisation for feedback. And it was a fairly simple feedback approach, asking, did they love it, did they hate it, and what else have we missed, or what else would they like to add in? And then from there, really commenced with that rollout, a good comms plan, a good change plan. The other thing that I think has been really beneficial in terms of that exec engagement was we've taken a very experimental approach, and we've actually introduced it as a 3-month trial initially. So that kind of alleviated any of the concerns around what if it didn't work, or what if there were some things that we hadn't expected to arise. So by introducing it as a trial, we also were able to message both to the LT and to the whole organisation, we might not get this right first time, and that's okay. We don't expect to be able to please everybody, and that's okay. We're giving this a go, we'll course correct, we'll tweak it as necessary. So I think that was a really useful approach to bringing the SLT on board. We're about midway through the trial now, and I'd say we've definitely got really strong leadership support, and we're now in the throes of all the things that were flushed out that we didn't quite anticipate and expect. So we're in the realness of unraveling some things, solving problems that we hadn't expected, course correcting, tweaking, and all those good things that come with this. So right in the thick of all the fun.
That's awesome, Ruth. And what about in terms of that openness to experimentation? Like, did they all sign up and opt into that straight out of the gate, or did you have to coach for it?
A little bit of both, to be quite honest. I think there's what's interesting is there's a bit of an expectation, I think, from the business that leaders have all the answers and we should get it right first time. That's the flavour that I've kind of got. Whereas the LT were much more open to, I think it was a bit of a relief for them to go, let's take this view of experimentation and trial, because then we don't have to have all the answers first time. So I'm working quite a lot with the organisation to help them understand that we're learning as we go. And going back to the guiding principles that I developed, I was really pleased that one of the ones that we landed was we all play a part in our success with this. So it allows us to really have quite empowering and yet firm conversations with people on the role that they play in the success. So there's lots of elements to it that we're still flushing out. It's a change of working, obviously, for people, and it's a little bit of a change of approach in general that is probably where we are providing more support and, as I say, encouragement and empowerment.
And what's your cautionary tale, Ruth, for all the HR TechFesters, right? Because it is the toughest conversation to have. So what's your cautionary tale that you could offer up for the room today? I think I would definitely say don't expect to get it right first time. Emma, you'll know, because I told you, if you don't follow Emma on LinkedIn, she uses a lot of quirky little memes that are hilarious, and I've used a few of them to illustrate our journey on the way. So the cautionary tale being, you are not going to please everybody. Almost a little bit of I feel a little bit that we perhaps offered or indicated too much and then had to dial it back. So that would be a caution. There's, this whole school of thought around listen to what your people want, which of course is really relevant, but we're consulting engineers of a small company. Productivity and utilization is so important, otherwise the business financially doesn't survive. So we need to make sure that this really works for the business. So it's getting that balance. Unless you mean it, don't go out and say you can have full flexibility, because what we ended up coming up with as our trial
doesn't have full flexibility. You can't pick the days that you are working from home at this point in time, and that was for multiple reasons that are relevant for this organisation and won't necessarily be relevant for everybody, but that would be my main cautionary tale. Be cautious about offering the world if you don't think you can deliver the world. And one of the things that we've flushed out has been this notion of more flexibility in our hours. So we're now looking at core hours, which was not something that we'd even considered when we originally went out with the hybrid model.
Nice. So lots of wisdom there. So Ruth is going to monitor the chat now. So if you've got any questions, drop them in there. She will do her best to address them. So let's say you line up your exec, your board are behind you, you've consulted with your people. Now, what does that look like for the employee experience? What changes? What doesn't? Where are the bright spots? What are you bridging? Like, what are all those things? And I really loved our conversation, Leslie, around how do you work out which parts of the employee experience to redesign or not? What did you do at Easy Crypto? Because you're a remote first principles organisation, aren't you?
Yes, we are. So for those who don't know, Easy Crypto is a crypto exchange. So we buy, sell, swap crypto. And with the business, when it started, our founders started it as a remote first company. And I think what's really important in that is it was remote first flex. So what that meant is that our team could work from anywhere in the world where we operated. And they also had the flexibility to work at any time of the day that suited them. What we wanted to create was a sunrise sunset company, which essentially was 24 hours, always available for our customers and moving with the market that we operate in. So when I started with Easy Crypto, it was already a remote first company. And the remit for me when I joined was to help the business to scale internationally. And first and foremost, that was bringing on new talent globally, but also to open new markets. And so the focus for me was to understand what was working well in Easy Crypto already, what was making our culture so great that we were able to scale, and then what do we need to enhance or what do we need to change as we scale rapidly. And we've employed 45 people in 6 months now, which is rapid scale for a company that was 67 when I joined. And in doing that, we were very intentional about communicating our remote first flexible culture. And that started with employment brand, which is an area that I have a lot of experience in. And I wanted to be able to communicate to potential candidates what it meant to work in remote first flex at Easy Crypto versus another company. And that comes with a lot of autonomy. You need to be the type of person that is self-motivated, that is able to work remotely from wherever in the world, but manage your own workload. A company where expectations are clear and the problems to solve are very clear, but the way you go about doing that is up to you. And also working in a very transparent company where documentation is key. And I know Pene knows a lot about this area, but documentation is key. So working in that type of transparent culture isn't for everyone. And so communicating that first and foremost in our employment brand enabled us to select the right people to move forward, but also for those who didn't feel that that was right for them to self-select themselves out. And I must say that the number of candidates that applied with us because we were remote first made us a very attractive company to work for, not only in New Zealand, but globally as well. And so when we then moved into the recruitment phase, we focus heavily on culture in the first interview. We don't talk all about skill or capability in the first interview at all. We talk about the culture that we have here and the way that we work together. And in doing that, we engage people within the business to be involved in that first interview. So it's not hierarchy-led interview. It's about collaborating and having conversations with people in the business to understand how that works best for them. And then we move through to the onboarding phase as we were rapidly onboarding lots of people, which the business hadn't done before, and gaining feedback from those who were joining us and how we could execute onboarding at a global scale with competing time zones. And we came back to the principles of Flex Remote, which is transparency and documentation. So our full onboarding process is available to anyone in the company to be able to pick that up and to support the onboarding of a new person in the business. and fully documenting the onboarding experience so that no matter where you were in the world, what time zone you were in, you had access to that information at any time. And so using feedback, listening to people as they came into the business and understanding the pain points, and then actually having our new starters co-create our onboarding experience and then our talent experience and our succession experience. They were involved in that co-creation through joining us. And what's interesting about this remote first flexible work is that everyone has access to the same information, and that it's constantly being amended over time. So it's open source. So day, night, that information is changing and being amended by the people in the business who know that information best. And then when you wake up the next day, there's iterations of that information and people are constantly building. So it's a community of people, not just led by HR, that enable this type of culture.
And so even for a company that was already embracing remote first, was there anything that caught you by surprise or that you found particularly challenging?
The issue that we had when I first joined was definitely the transparency of information in a knowledge system. So we had Slack and all of our channels were open and people had access to all information on Slack for every team. However, we didn't have a knowledge library. And that source of truth, that was more long tail content, that wasn't changing. It was the opportunity to leverage a knowledge library system and then influence the business to become a documentation culture. And that was a key piece of work that the internal comms team has undertaken over the last 6 months, is to bring everyone on that journey as we scale rapidly. And then I think we overlay the complexities of a global company where you've got to think about diverse cultures and languages as well in that documentation environment. It's been a huge challenge for us to be able to connect with everyone globally, but also respect their individual needs and the information that they need to access in their local language. And making sure that that is available for everyone. So it's an equal playing field. And I think that really speaks into the industry that we're in, and equality and equal access for all and decentralization. And we need to live that within the culture that we have.
So your background in employment branding and EVP must have been a nice skill set for them to have, because how have you gone communicating that?
It's very one-to-one, which may surprise a lot of people in a remote first culture, because the expectation is that we would document everything and then we would remove personal connections, whereas we really lean into personal connections. And that's where that first interview, talking just about culture with people within the business, leans into personal connections. And then when someone starts, they get matched with 5 random people within the organization, ideally not within the country that they're operating or working in order to build those personal connections further. And there's lots of opportunities for that are very much curated within our business, like donut calls. I'm sure everyone's heard of them through Slack. But there's also these micro moments that happen naturally on Slack primarily, where you can just huddle someone, use the call feature to immediately call someone and interact with them. So we've got this mix of async and sync comms, and I think that really brings to life this EVP of remote flex first.
So good. You better check your chat. You've probably got some questions in there you need to tend to at some point, but that's awesome. Thank you for those insights. So when you move through this level of culture change, like culture is what you repeatedly do, right? So for those of us in enablement or learning roles, this is where like the rubber hits the road for us. So in terms of learning new hybrid norms, adopting new mindsets, getting teams to, set up new routines and practices is a big piece of implementing this sort of work. So I'll throw to you now, Eilís, because you're actually in the eye of the storm around this. Actually, you're on the other side of launch and you're scaling now. So you've got lots to share on this topic around enablement. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so just for some context, at Bravura, we are a global fintech of about 1,500 employees, but much of our experimentation around hybrid work has been focused on our team in New Zealand, mainly because up until relatively recently, they were the team that enjoyed the longest period of uninterrupted freedom from lockdowns, but that has changed in recent months. But I think before I can speak to habits and practices, I need to give a mention to the hybrid fit mindsets that we co-designed with our people, because they really did form the foundations of the norms, the habits, and the practices that followed. Before we even looked to launch any formal enablement initiatives, our primary goal was to simply socialize the mindsets at every possible given opportunity, and just to ensure that people were familiar with them first and foremost, even just as concepts. Our enablement initiatives were then designed to take them from concepts on a page to a more tangible experience. So our next step was ensuring that our people managers were clear on their role in leading the change. And we achieved this with the support of Nick and Emma through a bit of a change leadership bootcamp, which focused on creating a shared vision of the future state and the behaviours needed to get there from our leaders. And what I find was really effective is we wrapped up our bootcamp session with participants, each sharing a commitment to their peers around how they will embrace the learning ahead. And I felt that that really helped set a really positive tone of accountability as we moved into the next phase, which was activating the mindsets in our broader teams. Enablement for us was really quite a blended experience. So on one hand, we had structured facilitated sessions using Miro, of course, but we also had a broader 30, 60, 90-day calendar of touch points with opportunities for people to learn by doing. And just to give a bit of an example of how this approach worked for us in practice, one of our enablement sessions focused on well-being, which I'm sure is something we can all agree has never been a more critical conversation. But during these sessions, we introduced a series of tools, and we used breakout rooms just as a way to experiment with trying them on for size. These tools range from things like setting team norms to running retrospectives to something as simple as effective as using emojis to kickstart a conversation about team wellness in a way that felt comfortable to those who aren't as familiar with leading that kind of conversation. So that was what was covered in the classroom component, but as part of our 30, 60, 90-day plan, we also had a series of team health checks scheduled where managers were tasked with running a bit of a reflective team health monitor exercise within their teams using the tools that they tried on previously. And by doing this, we really stretched our managers, but in a very safe way. And we were also laying the foundations for continuous improvement and for habits to be formed by ensuring that these team health checks are now something that are expected as a quarterly ritual. But I'd say that we are still very much on that enablement journey. So we are the other side of launch, but I think enablement is going to be something that it's just going to be an ever evolving journey for us. And something that's really emerged is the need for a new brand of leader with a very particular set of skills, as Liam Neeson would say. So the next phase of our enablement has really involved working with them and Nick at Anywhere Culture to evolve our more traditional management development program into Anywhere Leadership, which is built around our hybrid mindsets and ensuring that our leaders are confident leading healthy, connected, supported teams, regardless of where they're working from.
So good. And recently you should follow Eilís, look her up on LinkedIn. You posted recently about quite heartfelt your learnings as a practitioner as you move through a lot of this for the first time yourself. What's a heads up that you could give people to either lean into or watch out for or stood out for you?
I think you don't believe everything you think. So this was the first project that we ran as co-design, and we really had everything that we believed about what our people wanted and needed from our culture really shaken. And that's because we really got under the hood with the empathizing phase of the project. So I think just getting used to being wrong was quite a challenge for us, but it's put us in good stead. But feedback, just feedback at every possible touch point is a gift, and it just makes sure that the outputs that we're delivering are reflective of what people have told us they want to see, and it's just completely free of assumptions.
That's so cool. Thank you, Eilís. Talking about capability, so if you're in a team who has to roll out this stuff and maybe you're using new tools, you're adopting new practices actually for the first time yourself while trying to lead your organisation through the change. So this is a big one, and Pene, you and I jam on this a lot about this idea of capability uplift and what it means to lead in this new era of work. And we're seeing a trend in heads of remote, chief hybrid officers. So we're really investing in this globally as a profession. So you are no stranger to setting up remote first cultures, but you've had a really good experience at noissue. So I guess my question to you is, what do you think our fellow practitioners need to invest in to upskill in their own capability to really drive this stuff in their organisations?
Okay, good question. So I think some people may have heard sort of my talk yesterday, and I think I overused the word mapped out far too much. And really the data that we use. I think one common thing I hear often in people practitioners is, I can't do the numbers, I'm a people person, is one thing, or I'm not technical, or sort of really indexing in on that. And sort of making that a little bit of the HR identity. We're people, right? We're not necessarily numbers people or commercial people. I'll go to the CFO for that, or I'll go to the CTO for those things. And I think in a hybrid or remote setting, you sort of have to, particularly if you're designing, we've talked about this before, designing documentation, rolling things out, it's kind of impossible to go off gut or have a one-on-one conversation with everyone. You definitely need to layer that in, and that adds to it. But your base level is a lot of data, it's a lot of analysis. So really leaning into that and having a curiosity around new technology, around numbers and financials, and really how things work. Because I think there are, when you're scaling remote, and you're scaling remote globally as well, things that you sort of get leaned on is, what market do we hire in? Our revenue's USD. Where is it most advantageous for us to hire this person because of the strength of the US dollar? Questions like that start to come into your role, particularly in that remote setting, because then your workforce plan starts to kind of get dictated by things like that. So really leaning into the numbers. You've got entities set up, you're leaning into tax, that's good fun. Really that technical side. So the people skills that you kind of build in your people profession are really great. They give you that curiosity, they give you that ability to ask really good questions, to sort of dig in and find what the root cause of something is. Those set you up really well. I think where you layer on top is that commercial piece. It's the numbers, it's the financials, it's being able to roll out, a knowledge base. For instance, you need to put on your internal comms hat, you need to put on your systems hat, and really optimize structures and systems. And that can be quite a new or foreign skill set. And then the last one I'd kind of add into that is a really strong skill set on recruitment. So, quite often the two are seen as separate, HR and recruitment. And key to that hybrid is knowing, how to assess capabilities of your team, how to assess that mindset, that capability of people coming in internally. And quite often that's that's recruitment, or I don't do recruitment. So really leaning into that skill set, because it's critical you hire the right people. You need to have a really structured process around that. Really be able to understand, the capabilities to feed it into onboarding and development and so on, and spot kind of things within your organisation. So recruitment's a really strong capability.
And Pene, for the people who are in the crowd going, we just don't have enough people to do all of that, can we hear how lean you run your team to stand up all of those practices?
Yeah, so we added 92 people last year, the people team, and we run people, internal systems, internal comms, onboarding, recruitment. The lot is myself and 1.5 others. Through all of that. So all of our recruitment, all of our onboarding, all of our internal comms, all of our internal systems, the lot, we wear all of those hats and have scaled that up. At any one time, kind of this time last year, would be wearing my VP of people hat, and I had 30 roles under recruitment. So you've really got to be able to juggle that, which is also why having a good recruitment background sets you up well.
So all of our peaks will roll off the back of these 2 days where you've just had some really rich information, and you're probably going to do one or two things. Nothing, which would be really bad and sad, or you're going to be like, where do I need to build some muscle in my own skill set? So Pene, to finish you up, if they have to leave the room right now and add something to their development plan, what skills should they be investing in?
Ooh. I'd probably go with some good like Excel or Google Sheets. Honestly, the ability to just like go and do your own analysis is just so important. And yeah, I just often have those conversations with people and they're like, I can't do Excel or I can't do Google Sheets or any kind of, analysis, right? And like, it's just, there's so many YouTube videos out there. Like every time I've got a question, I'm Googling it, like figuring out a formula, or I'm trying to copy someone else's spreadsheet. Like, you don't need to have all the answers. You just need to kind of lean into, I can learn this, and go and, give it a go, really.
So Google Sheets, how to do those.
Yep.
At least you take it right back there.
Yeah, my YouTube history is just different formulas in Google Sheets.
That's awesome. Okay, I'll give you a second just to check the chat, Pene, and see if there's any questions for you. But I just want to thank everybody on this call and on the panel and joining us from Zoom today. You will not get a more generous bunch of practitioners. Hit them up on LinkedIn if you've got questions when you leave the room today. Like, they are so open. If you were here for Pene's session yesterday, she just gave everybody like the keys to the city. We don't hold on to staff. They don't hold on to staff. So like, use your network to really build out your growth plans and start thinking about, how can I raise this as a strategic agenda item at my organisation. So before we throw up the last slide, Anthony, I'm just going to say good night, Eilís. It's time for you to go to sleep. Thank you so much for joining us from Ireland. Ruth, that was awesome. Every time I hear your journey, I just love it. I'm so inspired. Leslie, thank you so much for being here too, and as well as Pene. And Nick, my fellow Anywhere Culture co-founders, lurking around somewhere. I said Ruth. I said Ruth. I said Ruth. So let's throw up the last QR code, team, because Nick and I have been doing this work for 2.5 years. We were born in the first 3 months of the first lockdown. We are constantly growing our skill sets. People think that we've just emerged from nowhere. We haven't. We've been doing the work. We've been prototyping. We've been experimenting. We've been listening to customers. We've been listening to our peers. So we wanted to extend an offer. We've got 10 slots in our calendars over the next 2 weeks. If you want to ask us anything, how do you get your exec to the table? What skills should we be building? How do you redesign culture to be remote first? Whatever it is, get your teams together and we'll join you for a call. So that's a direct link to mine and Nick's calendar, and feel free to lock us in. But that's the end of our session. So I hope you got lots from that. So enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks, panel.